Well, Tori, you've been looking at the president's supplemental spending request
Mhm.
for international security. Can you break down where the money would go?
Sure. So the president has issued so far one supplemental request, though we have been informed that a second one would be coming. The first supplemental is largely a security supplemental. There are four buckets. The broad total, close to roughly $106 billion. The four buckets are money for Ukraine, that's about $61 billion. Money for Israel, about $14 billion. And then between the two of them, there's additional $9 billion for humanitarian assistance that would be shared between Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, etc. Third bucket is border security money, about $13 billion there. Most of it is for securing the border, hiring more um, uh, border patrol agents. But then there's the small bucket, which is basically countering China's influence, about $4 billion there, whether it's direct financial support for our Indo-Pacific allies in the area versus just countering China's influence in the developing world. So that's about $4 billion there. So that's sort of largely how the bucket breaks down. A majority of it is for Ukraine, absolutely.
And it would be designated an emergency and thus over and above the current spending cap for fiscal year 24.
Exactly, exactly.
Is it, I mean, this seems like a high amount for an emergency spending. I mean, is it part of this? I mean,
I
part of it certainly seems to be emergency. Part of it seems to be just sort of stuff that's bled into the baseline that we're going to spend more for.
Right. I mean, first of all, let me start off by saying, I've been either on the Hill or watching the Hill since late 90s, early 2000s. I cannot remember a supplemental this large. Now, part of it obviously is inflation, but yowza, this is a whopper of a supplemental. And, some of it, you're right, was unforeseeable. I mean, who could have foreseen Hamas attacking Israel? All right. So, yeah, I get the whole Israel was totally unplanned, unanticipated, totally earns the emergency designation. But we've been funding efforts in Ukraine now, since they invaded, since Russia invaded Ukraine, which has been, how
Year and a
many,
half.
yeah, a year and a half now. Um, and I'm very much worried that we're getting into funding another war, if you will, off the books. We're continuing to fund aid for Ukraine on an emergency basis rather than putting it into our baseline and planning for it accordingly. Um, and
Well,
that concerns me. We don't know how long this,
yeah, I
this
mean,
war.
60 billion is supposed to be for the year, and
Mhm.
that's more than a lot of federal agencies. So
Right, and we've already given 44 billion already. So you add another
it's not to
61 there,
say we
and
shouldn't. It's not to say we shouldn't be doing it. It's just like, if it's going to be a regular recurring expense of that size, we should
let's
plan.
plan for it. Exactly. Plan for it, budget for it, pay for it.
Um, well, we don't know what the prospects are of any of this supplemental because there's such division in Congress. But
Mhm.
and until the House elects a speaker, we won't be able to move any legislation anyway.
I was gonna say it's a really weird dynamic right now, and that aid to Israel divides the Democratic caucus, and aid to Ukraine divides the Republican caucus. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, on this is like the paralysis is not necessarily along party lines.